Hi, I'm Morgan Jerimas with RT Book Reviews, and I'm here today with Mary Burton, romantic suspense author extraordinaire.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm so excited whenever I read your book because lately I've really been getting into romantic suspense. I think that there's just an absolute renaissance going on right now within the genre, and we're getting so many great stories. What do you kind of attribute that to, maybe?
I think romantic suspense is the perfect blend of hope and justice. You've got the romance, which gives you that hope at the end, and the romantic suspense, which offers, or the suspense, which offers kind of a sense of justice when you catch the killer. And if you blend the two together correctly, I think each is feeding off the other. Each is making the situation worse for the other, and that's the best balance for romantic suspense. You know, as the romance may intensify, it's going to make the detective work that much harder. As the detective work gets trickier, the romance might get more complicated. So they kind of feed off of each other really well.
Absolutely, and I think another thing that we're seeing that's maybe a little bit different from some romantic suspense that we've read previously is I think we're seeing a lot more violence, a lot more on-the-page violence. We're getting very gritty stories.
Edgier. Yeah.
I like that, and in your writing, you definitely do that. You don't get gratuitous, things happening, but we definitely get to see kind of that evil underbelly.
Well, yeah, and that's setting the stakes. I mean, there is danger. You want to be worried about your heroine. You want to worry that bad things can happen, and that's how you do that. You kind of create that edgier environment or that edgier killer that's going to keep them turning the pages. I want them worried from page 1 on.
Well, they definitely will be in your stories because you set up these absolute villains that are just evil to the core. No redemption. They need to be caught and they need to be punished for what they do.
Well, they need to be caught and they are truly bad, but they do have those moments of goodness or occasionally that kind of will throw you off a little bit. I think evil is more interesting if it's not always evil, and it's even more dangerous if sometimes there's a kindness that might throw you off, like who is this person? Is it who I think it is? And it's another reason to keep that reader guessing. You know, who is this guy? What is he about?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Mary Burton voice, I guess.
Okay.
And one of the things that's really a hallmark of your writing is you have a very factual style. We get the facts. We know what's going on. A lot of times their new chapters have a date and a time on it. And I think it really lends itself to the romantic suspense because a lot of times your heroes will be police detectives or police officers, and they'll be it's kind of their maybe way of thinking in that logical what happens. Let's find out what's next.
Right. Yeah, and I start with the dating and the times because I'm setting the clock because it's usually a tight time frame within the book. It's a week, maybe 2 weeks. So I want the reader aware of time because time is kind of running out. So the clock is ticking. And I do put a lot of time and effort into research because I think that does add to the edginess and the reality of the book. You know, I spend a lot of time either reading books about police procedure or going to conferences for writers, to teach us these things. And I think that just kind of lends itself to the entire setting of the book. You know, the better I can get with the facts and the more realistic I can make it, I think the more interesting the book. And those mystery readers love, when you're pulling in mystery readers, they love the facts, they love the puzzle, and that's all a part of it.
I think that's absolutely true, and that's another aspect of your writing is that it's not only necessarily for romantic suspense fans, but you really have such strong mysteries and such strong thrilling aspects to it. And men would be very interested in your books. I'm sure you have a lot of male readers as well as very hardcore mystery fans being very interested in what's going to happen next and whodunit.
Exactly, and I'm seeing more men, especially at signings, picking up the book and trying it because I think they like that. The different cover, the edginess. They read the back cover and they think, oh, this sounds like something, police procedure, I could do this. It's not too romancy, but there is enough romance in it to kind of balance it all out. So for the romantic suspense reader, they get their kind of payoff at the end as well, too.
Well, let's talk about your newest book, Before She Dies. And in this story, we have Charlotte and Daniel. And Daniel, of course, is a police detective. I'm onto you with these cop heroes.
I know. I'm going to have to mix this up a little bit, I think.
but I love it because there's such a protectiveness that comes along with it.
There is. And it's kind of that archetype of, the strong chief or the warrior that appeals to readers. And plus, you're putting the hero right in the center of the action. So if he were, say, a house painter, he may not need to solve mysteries, but a police detective is going to be right in the center of the action. And I try to think about the heroine as well. You know, what does she do for a living that might put her in danger as well? You know, I'm always looking for ways to make everybody worried about their safety or danger or what have you.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't come out of nowhere either. When you do have these police detectives, or sometimes you have attorneys or psychiatrists, you know, they're in situations that can be dangerous. They're in situations where there are mysteries. You know, if you're a lawyer and you have a client that is, you know, you need to figure out, is this guilty or innocent? Or if there's a police detective, it's their job they're called to murders. It's not that they stumble onto them.
Exactly. And I like that logical, you know, everybody's there because they need to be. It's not happenstance, it's not coincidence. They're there for a reason. And that just makes more logical sense to me as a reader. So that's why I've always done that. But yeah, the police detectives, they have, they encounter such interesting things. And, you know, when I take these courses and they talk about some of the cases they solve, they can talk about things I would never dream of. And so I'm always taking great notes. It's like, keep talking, keep talking.
So in Before She Dies, you've got Daniel, who's a police detective, but really the mystery, the suspense aspect is surrounding Charlotte.
Right.
Now, in the book, what happens is when she's a teenager, she actually runs away from the carnival. And it's so funny because you always think of the opposite. The rebellion is always running to the carnival to get out of town. But she's really, she has gone through a very difficult time losing her sister. And she decides she just can't live that life anymore.
She's had enough. She's reached her breaking point. And she was a hard character to write because when I wrote the first draft, you know, she's a secretive person by nature. And I'd done character drafts and collages, and she just wasn't quite even opening up to me. So I started writing the book, and it wasn't until around page 400 of that rough draft that finally I figured out the secret that was really driving her, because I didn't quite know what it was all along. And once I figured it out, it all fell into place, and I understood why she was so guarded and why she always played her cards close to her vest. She's one of my favorite characters.
Can we talk a little more about your writing process? Because you said you were 400 pages into your rough draft before you finally, you know, really got to know her. Is that something usual for you, or usually when you start out a book, do you know how it's going to go and what's going to happen?
I know the plot. I've got about a 25 page outline, so I know what the plot's going to be, and I know basically about the characters, but I really don't know them until I start testing them in the plot. And they start doing things. It sounds like they're real people, but they start doing things that I hadn't expected. And I start digging in deeper and deeper into the character, and it just layers and layers start to add on, and it just makes it all that much more interesting, at least to me. But I find usually in the rough draft, they're kind of strangers to me, and as I get to know them better, and as I kind of scoot toward the edge of my seat when I'm typing, then I know I'm really getting to know them, and it's coming together. But it takes me about 5 or 6 drafts of a book. You know, the first draft is strictly, I call it the sloppy copy. I'm getting through it as quickly as I can because I want to get it into the computer. And then the second draft is more structural. You know, I'm making sure everything's in the right place. And by the third draft, I'm really starting to dig really deeply into the character and adding lots of layers and nuances that I just didn't see in the first draft. And by the 6th draft, I feel like I know him really well. And it's sad to see him go when I send him off, you know, because I feel like I've gotten to know him so well.
Can you tell me a little bit about Charlotte and Daniel, and maybe something that the reader's going to really identify with both of the characters when they read this novel?
Let's see. Well, I mean, Charlotte is a successful woman. She's done well for herself. She's self-made. I mean, she's brought herself up from nothing. She left the carnival. She's a smart woman, and she's gone far in the world. And I think she's kind of reached the point where she's always figured she will be isolated and she will be alone. And the minute Daniel meets her, he just knows he wants her in his life, and it becomes him kind of convincing her that she's right. You know, he's right for her.
I like that. I like that. It's not necessarily a role reversal, but it's really interesting to see a man that is so committed and wants the relationship and is willing to do what it takes.
And he's a very family-oriented person. He comes from a strong family, almost the opposite of her. And so he sees what can be. And she has no concept of family or long-term marriage or happiness. And But he can see the possibilities, and he just knows if he kind of hangs in there long enough, she'll see him for the guy he really is.
She'll know that they're
She'll
meant to
know.
be together. Well, I love that you add the romance too, because I know originally you started in romance.
I did.
Historical westerns.
Historical westerns. I wrote 12 of those, and they were a little bit shorter books, and a lot of history, a lot of, the big focus was the romance. In fact, back in those days, I was always adding in mystery, but realizing it wasn't right and having to take it back out, but wanting to add it back in. So there was constantly trying to work mystery in when I knew it wasn't the right place for it. But yeah, I love history. I minored in it in college, or took a heavy minor in college, and I just love it. So I'm always reading a history. Whenever I get the chance, I'm reading a history book.
So when you're writing, do you find yourself not reading anything at all so it won't interfere with your writing? Or do you find yourself reading within your genre? Or I know some authors choose a completely different genre so it doesn't interfere. Where do you find your reading patterns when you're sitting down to write a novel?
When I'm writing a novel, I'm generally reading research books because some of the best ideas come out of research. And I do try to stay away from my genre completely. And I may read a young adult book, to kind of lighten it up at the end of the day. But typically I just read research because that kind of keeps me in the character a little bit more. It keeps me more focused. And then usually when I'm in between books, I try to read as much as I can, quick, and then, it's back into the next one.
When you take a vacation, you're all about...
That long weekend I take.
Well, can you tell me what's after Before She Dies? I know you're already working on your next one. Can you give us just maybe a little tiny taste of what we're going to see?
Well, I'm moving locations. I'd set the first 6 books, suspense books, in Virginia, and I thought it was time to kind of find a new location because I think the setting is a character, and it determines a lot about the book. So I thought it's time to leave Virginia. So I moved to Texas, in the Austin, Texas area, and again, it's another serial killer book. And this fellow is, I've got a heroine who's a photographer, and she's a survivor of an attack. And all her art kind of focuses on trying to remember that attack and what happened. And then the hero, of course, is a detective, and he's trying to help her solve. He's trying to help her solve the mystery of her past and the current murders that are going on in town.
Excellent. Well, I'm very much looking forward to it. Like I've said before, I think romantic suspense for me right now is just, I can't get enough. Every single book I've got to read, and I love the gritty. I love it. I love the serial killers. I love the
scarier the better.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to keep people up late at night, and I really want to scare them.
Yeah, and also I really feel with your books in particular, it's one of those things, because things happen so fast, you can't put them down. It's a one-sit read. You're going to sit down and you're going to absolutely go from start to finish, because you're not going to be able to say, oh, I'll get back to that. I'll see what happens.
That's intentional. I don't want to give you an excuse to go stir the pot or run an errand or put the book down. I want to keep you turning the pages until you're too tired to read.
Well, I think you absolutely accomplished that.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for making it with me today.
Thank you.